All right, we're changing this wheel bearing today on this 2015 Jeep Cherokee. It's a left rear wheel bearing. Now this is a limited model, all-wheel drive. It does have the axle in the back because of all-wheel drive. So let's get started. First thing we're gonna do is take these brakes off. And to do that, we're going to need 10mm socket or a wrench to take this bolt out. And then there's also a nut. You can see the nut there that holds that bracket on for the brake line. Once we get that bracket off, then there is a bolt in behind that. That's gonna let us get this brake caliper off. And while you're in the toolbox, go ahead, grab yourself a 5mm hex key so that we can get that brake set screw off as well. All right, T55 torque. Take those bolts out right there. You can get to the back side here if you use an extension and a swivel. I just have my gun hooked up. You can use a ratchet as well. All right, so once you get those T55 Torx bolts out, you take this bracket off and you get the rotor to deal with. So this one's nice and frozen on there with rust. So I just hold this hammer here, give it a couple schwacks. It's nice that there's no studs, so don't have to worry about hitting those. And next thing we're gonna do is clean up these threads and take this axle nut off. Get some oil on there. We got a 32mm socket. Just like that. And then we should be able to just push on this. Now there's no threads in the center of this thing, so you can put a punch right in the center of it, hit it with a hammer to break the splines free and get the axle to move inwards. We want to just make sure that they're free so that when we take the bolts out of the back here, we separate the bearing from the knuckle, that the axle lets go of the bearing itself. Now I know the do-it-yourselfers out there aren't going to have this luxury of using an air hammer, but this is my weapon of choice. All right, so to get these 4 bolts off on the back here, let me try to get you a better view. You're gonna need an E14 inverted Torx. There's 2 on the bottom, and then of course 2 on the top, right? So, you can see just like on the bearing. Here's the 4 holes that we got. You gotta get in there. Use whatever you can, extensions, ratchets. I'm gonna try to put a bunch of extensions and swivel and break them free by hand, and then use an impact gun to run them the rest of the way out. It does help if you put lube on the ends of these threads to while they work their way through the bearing. All right, now once you get to this point where you get all these 4 bolts out, you can grab a hammer and hit this as hard as you can if that's all you've got. If you got just a hammer, you're gonna have to give her all you got. Hit it right on this flange and try to break the seal between this piece and this piece. I mean, best case scenario, you take the bolts out and the damn thing just comes right off. But I mean, if you live somewhere in the Rust Belt, good luck. Now, you don't have to, but I'm gonna take this shield off. It's 4 10mm bolts, and I'm gonna get the shield out of the road. The reason I'm gonna do that is because I'm gonna use my air hammer with a chisel bit, and I'm gonna wedge it right in between the bearing and the knuckle and then break that bond free. All right, so you get this bearing off. Now we're gonna clean this surface up. You see I caused a little bit of damage there, but clean that up. It'll survive. Nothing major. Pretty well the only way to get these things off. I've seen guys pound on those with a hammer for like an hour. I actually seen a knuckle split in half one time. That was interesting. All right, take this little ring off right here. It sits in behind the bearing. Get that out of the road. Now we need to clean up inside of here. So I just stuff the axle down so that it's sitting down as far as it can, and I'll start working my way around. Just keep in mind that your sensor's right there. You don't want to break it. All right, blow this thing off, get it all clean, and then I'm gonna actually put a little bit of oil in around on the aluminum, try to keep it from corroding again. So do that, and then we'll go ahead and install our bearing and get the bolts started. All right, we got that little washer thing installed back there, the little shim. And now this bearing can only go on one way, right? And the threads only line up. If you have it turned the wrong way, the threads don't line up. So obviously it only goes on one way. Now we grab our bolts. Now these things come with red Loctite from the factory. So the manual says to clean this off and reapply with lots of red Loctite. It's completely up to you whether you do that or not. Yeah, we'll get those started, start tightening them down. We'll put our backing plate on with the 4 10mm bolts, and we'll start our axle nut. And then we'll go ahead and start torquing everything down. All right, so the hub bolts in the back are 70 foot-pounds, and then this axle nut is 148 foot-pounds. So we'll try to do this by myself one-handed. Yep, there we go. A little over, but that's okay. All I did here was stuck a couple of them bolts in there and wedge a pry bar in. Good to go. Now, one tip before we stick this rotor back on is we want to clean this surface in here. So you get all this rust buildup in here, and then now when it sits on this fresh face, it's not going to sit on there true, and then you end up having a tendency to feel a brake pulsation after you install everything, and it's because we didn't take the rust off. So make sure you clean that. All right, so once you get the face of the rotor cleaned and the backside of the rotor cleaned, install a little bit of anti-seize. It can be copper anti-seize or silver anti-seize, and that's going to prevent rust from forming and pushing this rotor out. Try not to stick it in the thread holes though, we don't want that. And we're going to install our rotor and install the set screw as well. And we can get our bracket on there for our brake pads. All right, these brake bracket bolts are 89 foot-pounds. All right, so I forgot to mention I did put blue Loctite on the brake caliper bracket bolts, and then put your caliper on. The bolt with the thread goes on the top so that you can then put the brake bracket on and install the nut on afterwards. I got the rim cleaned up, installed some, or applied some copper anti-seize onto the back of that as well. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, it's just something that I do. Don't get real sloppy with that stuff. You don't want to get it on the threads or anything like that. So at this point, we just double check our work, make sure everything's routed properly, you don't have any hoses twisted up, stuff like that, and then install the wheel, tighten the bolts down, and you will torque the wheel bolts to 100 foot-pounds. That's Chrysler's specification. And basically take it for a road test. I recommend retorquing wheel nuts after 100 kilometers. And that's about it. If you got any questions, throw them down in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Thanks, have a great day.